For over 1,000 years, the Igbo people governed themselves without a single king. No throne, no royal bloodline, no one person holding absolute power. They built one of the most sophisticated democratic systems in human history. Then the British arrived. In less than 50 years, they dismantled a governance system that had worked for centuries. Colonization didn't just take land. It took something far more valuable, the Igbo people's ability to govern themselves. The Igbo had government, it just didn't look like a European monarchy. At the center of Igbo political life was the village assembly, called the Oha or Amala. Every adult male, and in many communities, senior women too, had the right to speak and be heard. Decisions were made through consensus, not decree. Issues were debated, sometimes for hours or days. Age grades, Otu Ogbo, organized society by generation. Title societies, like the Ozo title, allowed men who had achieved wealth and demonstrated good character to earn respected positions. The Dibia, priests and spiritual diviners, held significant influence. The Orokuku oracle, known as a Benakabi, served as a kind of supreme court. This was a complex, functioning system of checks and balances built on consensus, accountability, and shared power. When British colonial administrators arrived in Igbo land in the late 1800s, they were confused. They were used to dealing with centralized kingdoms, places with a single king they could negotiate with. But in Igbo land, there was no king to find, no single ruler to sign treaties with. The British saw this not as sophistication but as disorder. In direct rule, find local rulers, give them authority backed by British power, and govern through them. It had worked reasonably well in places like northern Nigeria, where centralized emirates already existed. It required something Igbo society simply didn't have, kings, so the British decided to create some. In 1891, the British introduced what became known as the Warrant Chief system. Colonial officers would select individuals, often based on superficial impressions. These warrant chiefs were given powers that no traditional Igbo leader had ever held. They could collect taxes, they could enforce British law, they could imprison people. This was completely alien to Igbo political culture. In traditional Igbo society, a leader who abused power could be challenged, shamed, or removed by the community. Predictably, corruption exploded. Warrant chiefs extorted their own people. They imposed unfair taxes. The very foundation of legitimate authority, community consent, had been ripped out. By 1929, Igbo frustration with the warrant chief system reached a breaking point. Igbo women organized a massive uprising that became known as the Aba Women's War. They used a traditional practice called sitting on a man, organized public shaming through chanting, dancing, and surrounding a person's home. The women specifically targeted the most corrupt and abusive warrant chiefs. The British responded with violence. Over 50 women were killed. It was undeniable proof that the warrant chief system was a catastrophic failure. The age grade system weakened as colonial education and Christianity reorganized social structures. Traditional title societies lost much of their authority as colonial courts replaced community consensus-based justice. The Orokuku oracle's influence collapsed as colonial administrators actively suppressed traditional religious institutions. By 1960, new traditional rulers were installed in many communities, creating monarchical structures that had never historically existed. Some historians argue this contributed to political fragmentation during the Biafra crisis. What the British destroyed wasn't just a political system, it was a philosophy of governance. A philosophy that said power should be distributed, not concentrated. In many ways, the Igbo traditional governance system was more democratic than the British system that replaced it. What wisdom was lost when Igbo traditional governance was dismantled? The Igbo people built a system of checks and balances, community consensus, and earned leadership, centuries before these ideas became celebrated elsewhere. Subscribe to Igbo Vibe TV. Jidu Mama. See you in the next one.